And we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to the December version of the MTSS Implementation Toolbox series. Today is kind of a fun day because we are going to go on a field trip. Essentially what I've done is I've pulled together 4 web pages that I frequent often when folks call me to provide, support for them with their MTSS implementation. And this is a really great set of materials that will be useful for you for your own professional learning, to provide support for others that are looking for professional learning, particularly in implementation science or implementation of MTSS processes. Okay, so I do start each implementation toolbox series session on with a quick overview of Maine's MTSS framework, just so you have an idea and a foundation of where I'm coming from. And then we can make the connection of why I would show you these particular resources for you to use. So Maine's MTSS framework essentially is comprised of 5 critical components. These are the components that we feel make up a comprehensive framework for implementing MTSS within your schools and within your districts. And so first, that schools have a leadership team that uses live data to improve teaching and learning. Number 2, that schools utilize school-wide and grade level teams that evaluate universal instructional integrity, student response to instruction and supports, and identify growth areas for instructional practice. 3, that schools prioritize effective universal instruction, otherwise known as Tier 1, for all students, regardless of IEP 504, multi-language learning, etc., and ensure relevant and timely access to additional and intensified support when indicated. 4, schools have a library of evidence-based resources and ensure equitable access for all students, regardless of eligibility for special education and other related services. And 5, that schools create dynamic partnerships with families and community members designed to support and empower family and community engagement. So Maine's framework, yes, this slide is blurry, I apologize. So Maine's framework has 5 critical components. It also has 4 delivery pillars. So we agree that there are these 5 critical components that come up that comprise MTSS framework for the state of Maine. And then through delivery, we realize that it really comes down to these 4 delivery pillars for getting those 5 components into action. So this is like the 5 critical components is the theory. This is the action that puts those steps into motion. And starting with the segment on the right, problem solving, we believe that schools and districts should be using a consistent problem solving model throughout their programming in order to ask the question of how are students doing with the content and with the skills being taught, and how do we make decisions based on a problem solving model. Educator support is that bottom section. Basically, we believe that A plus B equals C. That change for students lies in the behavior of the adults. So adults plus their behavior equals change for students. Over off to the left-hand side, we have that blended delivery. That's the idea that it's all students, all educators, and all hands on deck all the time. And we really think about how can we blend our efforts as much as possible rather than segregating them, strengthen numbers, and really looking at how can we have an all hands on deck approach for all students the minute they walk through that door. And then that top segment, Tier 1, we're really looking at prevention over intervention. Your MTSS really does start in that Tier 1, and really looking at that instructional practice for all students. Asking, instead of asking, why isn't what we're doing working for these kids, meaning kids that might belong to a particular student group of some kind, but instead asking, why isn't what we're doing working for all kids or for most kids? And really looking at some of that decision-making process from that ground level, because you can't have Tier 2 or Tier 3 without a robust, thriving Tier 1. And then finally, we have this one big idea, and that is that MTSS isn't something that a school does. We don't do MTSS when things aren't going right. We become an MTSS. It's something that a school is. So every decision, every policy, everything that we do comes in at that ground level, and we ask, how does this support the overall implementation of everything that I'm doing in my build. Okay, so we're going to jump into our first resource, and that is going to be exploring the SWIP Schools resources. What I like to use this resource for is right up here in the right-hand corner, you'll see that there's a button for resources. When you click on that, you are brought to a repository of tools and videos and resources that you can use to help with your MTSS implementation. So if you scroll down, you'll see that there's support for MTSS framework building, and then there's support in this middle column for MTSS implementation. One of the areas of the implementation section that I do want to point you to is this transformation and practices summary. This is an excellent summary for looking at transformation practices within a school setting when thinking about that big idea of that MTSS is not something that you do, it's something that you are. And so this brief really gets to the heart of that particular concept, that MTSS is a system that is implemented from the ground up and not supplemented into an existing system. It becomes the system. The other thing that I would point out in the implementation column is this brief here, third one down from the middle, increasing equity in education through stage-based implementation of universal design for learning. Universal design for learning has come a long way in the last couple of years, originating from something that was based mostly in technology to really expanding to good quality tier 1. So from that delivery pillar of tier 1, universal design for learning plays a huge role in creating these robust tier 1 settings for all students and really embodying multiple aspects of, I guess, so really it would be 4 of the 3, or 3 of the 4 delivery pillars. The tier 1 pillar, the all hands on deck pillar, and then the educator support system pillar. And then finally, before I stop talking so that you can explore, take a look over on the MTSS framework side. The SWIFT Center offers a relatively comprehensive tracking tool or self-assessment tool, you could say, for MTSS implementation. And they do call it the Fidelity Integrity Assessment. So it's the 5th one down in that 3rd column. What's interesting about the SWIFT Fidelity Assessment is that it's a pretty comprehensive rubric that schools can use to monitor where they are with current MTSS practices and implementation. But the other thing that they offer is a tracking tool. And when you download the tracking tool, you actually get your own copy of an Excel spreadsheet where you can track your answers over time, and then it can help guide which parts of the rubric that you can work towards and move towards at your own pace. The resource that I want to share with you today is actually comes out of the University of Florida, and it is it's a series of modules that they put together that are specific to MTSS implementation, what the needs are. And so I want to go ahead and focus on just a couple of areas before I send you off to do a little bit of exploring. But if you look under the multi-tier systems of support module, you'll notice that there are 2 introductory courses that are available for multi-tiered systems of support. And what is interesting about these is they are not specific to Florida. While they do mention Florida, in the course, it's not specific to Florida schools. So the points that are taught in these courses can be adapted and used anywhere. And so both of these courses are quite good. And I believe they're still free. So you do have to enter an email address in order to get access to them, but they are free courses for you to take. And then under the problem solving one, this one actually I think is probably my favorite set of courses, because if we talk about those 4 delivery pillars like we talked about earlier, the problem solving courses that are available through Thinkific and the University of Florida directly relate to that problem solving pillar of Maine's MTSS framework. And so the tier 1 problem solving and the overview of the 4-step problem solving, these are excellent courses for not only your, your MTSS team members, but for your classroom teachers to understand as well, because your classroom teachers are a critical part of the school's overall problem-solving model for delivering appropriate MTSS for students. And so the tier 1 problem solving course, I will just go ahead and click on it, is an excellent resource. And you can see the link that's right here. This is one of those ones that you'd have to enter an email address in order to get access to the course, but that's there is no paywall. So once you enter your email address, you are able to get access to the course. And so both of these courses are actually excellent for classroom teachers to learn about their school-wide problem-solving model, for schools to learn about school-wide problem-solving models, and then to figure out how to adopt a problem-solving model. I also offer a resource that is based on the information that I learned over the course of the Florida modules. And so while I give you an opportunity to explore this resource, I will go ahead and pull up the course that I made that offers a very short, I think it takes about 30 minutes to get through, problem solving in tier 1 course that could be helpful for you to use as well. So let me pull that up while you take a moment to explore, and we will go to the next resource at 410. Couple things that I will point out is that under the coaching section of Thinkific, or I guess it's not Thinkific, but the Florida RTI resource, under the coaching tab, the systems change and 8-step problem solving introduction, and then diving deeper into the 8-step problem solving process. Both of those are really great resources for exploration and developing the educator support pillar of Maine's MTSS framework. So it's not necessarily, I mean, yes, it's rooted in coaching, but the information in the course really is great for looking at your current process for educator support as it relates to MTSS implementation and what areas you might be able to explore to make changes or assess how things are going, that kind of thing. Did anybody see anything on this segment of our field trip that was particularly interesting or exciting to them that they wanted to share out?
I went off script, but I do like the fact sheets off to the left. I like a good fact sheet. Not in the modules, beside the module. Yeah, right there. Like,
Andrea, this is Deb Young. I'm just excited to have more resources for our team when topics come up in discussion and so on, as we're building sort of our school-wide and district-wide MTSS system.
Deb, if you're speaking, I actually can't hear you. Was anybody speaking just now? Oh, okay. I cannot hear anybody's voices at all. I can only hear myself. I just thought you guys were a super quiet group because I have not heard a single word. I'm so sorry. Okay, so it says Deb and Dee both offered something to the group. So Deb, would you mind just reiterating a little bit about what you said before we move on to the next?
Sure, can you hear me now?
I can. For some reason, unless I have my headphones in, I can't hear anything. Like my speakers are not working. So.
Oh, okay.
They're in now.
I'm excited to have, a bank of resources for my MTSS teams as we develop. I'm not only continuing to develop the MTSS system here in Richmond for both the elementary and middle schools and sort of getting that continuity. So having those opportunities for people to see the same things And if we have come up with a question, here's a bank of resources to utilize. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, and what I like too is that this is not specific to elementary. A lot of MTSS resources are specific to elementary, and these are ones that can be adapted pre-K through 12. So if you dig a little, you're able to find resources that can help. And especially when we get to the Iris Center, you'll see that there are things in the Iris Center that will answer any question that will come up. The Iris Center is actually quite good. All right, awesome. So if you're ready to move on, it is 4:10. So we will go on to the next resource, which is actually put out through the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And this is the NERN Center. NERN stands for National Institute for Research Network. And they also are in partnership with something called CISIP. And I can never remember the CISIP acronym. I just know that it is, it's just CISIP. And so I'm going to go ahead and drop that for you there. It is going to take you to a website that looks like this with the compass on the front. And so this is an active implementation hub. And so, yes, state implementation and scaling up of evidence-based practices. Thank you. I can never remember that off the top of my head. And so I really like this. Now, this particular website and the resources at this website are not necessarily are not necessarily like pull them off the shelf and implement them like with your students or like with your teachers. A lot of this implementation hub stuff is really meant for like level decision making, district level decision making, a little bit more so of those higher level thought processes that come into implementation of MTSS. And so if I'm thinking back to a lot of teaming work. So like if I'm thinking back to the five critical components of Maine's MTSS, there's critical component 1 and 2, which are both rooted in data and teams and decision-making and implementation. This particular web resource is really good for critical components 1 and 2 of Maine's implementation framework. So if you scroll down when you get to the page, there's the where should I start and download learner pathways. You don't necessarily have to go there right now, but what I like to do is I like to start with the implementation practices section. So if you click on the implementation practices section, it takes you to this area of active implementation frameworks that are usable for your MTSS at the team level for decision making. I was going to have us watch this little 6-minute video that lands at the landing page, but it takes up too much time and we wouldn't get to all of the resources today. So I'll leave that to you to explore should you choose. But as you look down there, it actually takes this video and the concepts in the video and then breaks them down into their individual stages. And so really understanding that implementation is effective practice times effective implementation times enabling content, and that will equal socially significant outcomes for students. And so if you once you've watched that video, you can go directly to the resources of each of those components individually, or you can explore them at your own pace. A couple other things to note is that MTSS at the Maine DOE, or the Maine's model of MTSS, really, really looks at, so like if we look at that problem solving pillar of that graphic, the blurry graphic where there was problem solving on the right-hand side, all of that problem solving really is rooted into something called improvement cycles. And how are we best using continuous improvement cycles to make MTSS decisions and to build MTSS processes that are that include all students and all educators from the ground up. And so the improvement cycle segment of this particular resource, and particularly this one right here, which is Improvement Cycles Overview, is an excellent resource for exploring that problem solving component of Maine's implementation pillar. Another thing to note is that there are AI Hub modules that you can use, and you'll see again that improvement cycle module is module 5. I don't recommend doing these out of order. So if you're going to do the implementation modules, do them module 1 through module 6. They're really good, but again, they're not. It's not necessarily something that you would have like a classroom teacher do. So this would be something more that would be like perhaps done. You could do these as a school-wide professional development opportunity. You could implement it into your school-wide professional development, offerings throughout the course of a year. But this is really generally more indicated for like your MTSS team members that might be like interventionists or your your other decision makers like in your building. You may find it in cases that classroom teachers might enjoy learning about and being part of some of these modules, but I might not start there just as a jumping off point. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking for the next 5 minutes or so while you explore the Active Implementation Hub resources.
One thing that I will point out is that on the AI Hub website, if you are on that landing page, under enabling context, you'll see there's a link for Teams, and the resources specifically under this particular tab directly relate to that core, that component number 1 of Maine's 5 critical components of MTSS, and that is working on their teaming structure. So these are excellent resources for team approaches and team discussion and team learning. Did anything stand out to anyone that they thought was particularly useful or exciting for them, something that they're going to be interested in trying? Later on in the MTSS Toolbox series, we are actually going to be doing a deep dive into a specific NERN tool, which is the hexagon tool. And that is, I think, might be February or March, where we're actually going to do an even deeper dive into some of NERN's resources rather than this general overview. Anyone else? Okay, and so it is 4:20, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to our last stop on our field trip today. We are going to explore the IRIS Center, which is actually put out by Vanderbilt University. The resources at IRIS are extremely well put together. One thing that I like in particular about them is that they follow adult learning theory. And so I find that for me, when I'm participating in some of the modules on the IRIS Center, I know that as a learner, I connect really well to the content and how the content is presented. It's very predictable, it's very practical, and they allow a lot of opportunity for individual learners to really engage with the content based on their learning preferences and their learning needs. So I love how this particular resource is friendly for everyone in your school. I noticed that Mike offered that they've used some of these things before for ed techs and providing training for ed techs, and that's excellent. Okay, so these modules are friendly for everybody from all levels of your staff. When you get to the IRIS Center website, I will point you to the upper right-hand corner under resources. If you click on IRIS Resource Locator, you'll notice that it says modules, case studies, activities, and more. That's where we're going to stop today on our particular field trip. And what I like about this is that they have hundreds of different resources and lots of different topics for you to be able to explore. So just like right off the top, there are 63 different resources for learning about accommodations. Now, in my world and in Maine's MTSS world, accommodations are not specific to special education. We don't wait to give accommodations for students because they have a 504 and an IEP. Accommodations really and truly should come in at that tier 1 level whenever possible. There's actually a game that I'll sometimes play with participants in trainings called The Equator. We won't play it today because there really isn't going to be enough time for that. But basically what the idea is that accommodations are tools. And wouldn't it be strange if you woke up tomorrow and someone told you, have a great day, but you're only allowed to use 3 accommodations to get through your day. So you better choose wisely, right? Well, how many of you use the visor in your car when you're driving to or from work? How many of you wear glasses or contacts? How many of you have had to use a crutches or a cane before to help assist, with your walking because you had an injury? How many of you have ever used a step stool in your kitchen to reach something that's up high? Already, I just listed 4 accommodations that you have access to in your day. Now, wouldn't it be strange if you woke up tomorrow and someone said you're only allowed to have 3 accommodations? Of those 4, which would you pick? And then how would you have to adapt if you didn't have access to the other one? It's just a simple way of saying that we should be providing the tools for learning as much and as often as we can. And this particular section of this resource under accommodations is a really excellent place to learn about ways to incorporate accommodations into that natural tier 1, so that tier 1 becomes an inclusive place for all students, all hands on deck, right? So it really speaks to that blended learning. Or blended delivery of one of the 4 implementation pillars. It also speaks directly to critical component number 3 in Maine's critical components, basically saying that we provide equitable access to students' needs as often and as much as we can before failure occurs. And so being a little less gatekeepy about tools and a little more like here, like we are offering the tools as necessary. If you follow that unofficial course that I did send out that I created for tier 1 implementation, there's actually some videos related specifically to accommodations that also is just a very simple way of talking about accommodations and modifications and how they relate to tier 1 universal design. And so there's a lot of different areas here to explore. I will, and when you click on them, they are broken down into types. So there's modules, case studies to read, there are activities you can do, there are information briefs, all kinds of different ways to explore this content. So I'm going to stop talking while you explore, but certainly feel free to share out if you come across something that is particularly exciting for you or that you think others could benefit from. Anything exciting stick out to folks? Anything they think, oh, I've been looking for this, or I may go back and explore that later.
I was looking at the behavior and classroom management modules, of which there are many. And I feel like it's so great to not have to invent the content. The content has already been created. So
Yes.
for professional development opportunities for staff.
And I haven't watched I'm not gonna lie and say that I've watched like all hundreds of these on Iris, but I mean I've participated in probably 35 or 40 modules over the course of the Iris Center. And the content is really good. And I think that, you'll find that there's something here for everyone. So, if you need any support as you're going through and you're like, oh, wow, like, do you know this is a problem I'm having? I don't have time to look through the whole resource. Can you point me in the right direction? Just let me know because I know these 4 web pages pretty well, like the back of my hand. So I'm happy to help like sort through if you're finding like, I know we went through these really great resources, but I still don't really have time to dig through them. This is the problem I'm having. Can you help point me in the right direction? And so I'm happy to do that as well if you need that support. Anyone else? Okay, so it is 4:29. Does anybody have any questions before we jump off at 4:30? Okay, great. So my email is andrea.logan@maine.gov if you have any MTSS questions that you want to explore in the future. And otherwise, thanks for stopping by tonight, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.